So where do we go from here? I mean, we have a new administration. We have a bunch of foreign leaders showing up at the White House on Friday to talk about global regulation. Everything is on the table, it seems. I don't know how long that lasts, but it is on the table right now. How do you think this unfolds over the next 6 months, 8 months of a new administration?
Predicting a new administration is somewhere near impossible, since we don't even know who the appointees are yet. Right. So I may set that aside and say, but there are certain elements that are predictable, whomever they appoint to certain offices. One will be, obviously, increased regulation. Our guess is a fair amount of that, if you think about what will that mean, because everybody can say that sounds pretty standard fare. Transparency. Trying to figure out how to communicate more in the way of transparency, and this could be global. So there are things, whereas earlier I said some degree of regulation is country by country, and it's hard to disconnect capital from regulation. But certain things could go global. Certainly accounting policies can go global, and the orientation towards transparency. So I'll suggest that I think it's useful to move the discussion, the debate from mark to market, instead to transparency. How does one move to transparency and communicate as much information as possible? A second around regulatory will be fairly simple, and that is delevering. But I'll spend a moment on it because I think just as where we go from here, this is one of the major points. When you look at the system and the institutions, there's a statistical way I'll sort of come at it. The losses in the financial services globally have been somewhere now, I think we've crossed 700 billion of losses. I'm sure we have. So having crossed 700 billion, financial services have also raised now roughly 700 billion. That's a little short of that. But the first 300 billion lost by financial services, there wasn't that much capital raised to replace. It was about 100, because there was some cushion in the system. We've now, as you look at it in an overall system, the system has run out of capital, has run out of capacity. So it is at best adequately capitalized, but there's not excess in the system. And so as there are more losses or delevering, either one, there has to be more capital. So we have this dilemma where do you raise the capital? How do you raise the capital? And if you can't, then you have to scale back lending or scale back the balance sheet. So there is, as Roger alluded to, spilling over in the general economy, this lack of liquidity in the economy. It seems, as far as I can see, which is I can't see very far these days, or to see even 3 months is to see a long way, there is still so much delevering to take place, and there's no capacity in the system to do any incremental lending. To the contrary, people are still scaling back. The Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, and name a number of the securities firms are all still delevering. They're not where they need to be or want to be from a leverage point of view. So with that in place, I'll just focus. The regulators are going to come around to what should capital be, what should Tier 1 be, and this and that. That's fine. They'll set rules. But in the near term, we're not close to the right levels in any event. So I think that's a big part of regulation and where we're headed.
Just to pick up with what Gary said, because I think his focus is exactly right, this tension between the needs for capital and deleverage. And deleveraging is a rather frightening thought as to its impact on the overall economy. So I'd like to focus just for a moment on additional capital sources and the problems which Gary quite correctly identified. Let me deal with two. One is the smaller one, but it is a source of frustration to a number of people, including me, that we can't get it right so that private equity can really be a major investor in financial services companies, particularly depositories. The unwillingness to change the approach. It's not the law, it's not the rules, it's to change the approach to permit private equity to invest. Pick your number, it's 50 billion, 75 billion, and that's not going to do it, but that's an important start. The second, I hate to say this, but I think we have to be realistic. 700 billion is not enough. It's going to be, I don't think anybody's smart enough, but it's the trillion word. And I think we have to recognize that if we're going to get sufficient capital in the system to prevent deleveraging. And this whole debate about banks going out and using the capital to lend is totally misguided. If the capital enables banks to stabilize their current level of lending, that would be a major victory, much less lend anymore. If I could, just one other point very quickly, which is going to put me way out in a limb with maybe one other person. I do think that unless we have a federal policy on dealing with foreclosures, we are going to have a persistent problem. And whether it is exactly what Chairman Bear has proposed or some variant, an ad hoc solution, a series of ad hoc solutions are helpful. They are not the answer.